The other day, one of you sent me a note and said, I'd love for you to do a video on the basics. For example, what accounts should everyone have as they're trying to organize their finances? Well, I thought this was a great question because whether you're early in your career or you're transitioning to retirement or you're somewhere in between, having the right account set up and utilizing those accounts properly is key to creating an organized financial life and to optimizing your retirement planning. So in today's video, I'm going to walk through the 7 essential accounts that everyone should consider having, and I'm going to highlight some of the common mistakes and share some specific strategies to maximize each account's potential. And this is one of those videos that will be great for our regular viewers, but also great for people who are just starting out. So you might want to consider forwarding this to someone you think could benefit. And I'm going to warn you, some of these strategies, they fly in the face of conventional wisdom, especially my strategy for the third account I'm going to recommend utilizing. So I'd be interested to know your thoughts and your comments. Anything in this video surprise you or anything you disagree with, just leave it in the comment below. But first, my name is Kevin Lum. I'm a certified financial planner, and this channel is dedicated to helping 1 million people retire without worry. So today I'm going to go over the basics of each of these accounts, and then I'm going to get a bit deeper into the weeds and give you some particular strategies. And I think some of the strategies may surprise you just a bit. So let's dive in. The first account is a checking account. This is the basic account that everyone has or should has. It's where the majority of your everyday financial transactions are going to take place, either that or a credit card. It's where your paycheck or your retirement income is going to get deposited. You really want to think of the checking account as the hub of your financial life. And you want to make sure that it has enough money to cover your needs, but not too much money. But if you look at the interest that you're getting from your local bank, it kind of makes you want to cry, particularly when you compare it to what you could get in a money market fund or from a CD. And so you don't want to keep too much cash in your checking account, but you do want to keep enough money in that account that when you need to spend money or pay a bill or pay your credit card or whatever the case might be, you have enough money in that account to cover 1 to 2 months of living expenses. The second account is a cash management account or a high yield savings account. Now, the reason I mentioned a cash management account is I'm seeing more and more people use cash management accounts at a brokerage firm like Charles Schwab or Fidelity, because those cash management accounts can function as a high yield savings account. And in fact, in some ways have a bit more flexibility. You can buy government treasuries in those accounts. You can buy money market funds in those accounts. You can buy brokered CDs. So you can look at a bunch of different banks and choose the CD with the highest yield. And it's a little easier to buy and sell. So more people are beginning to use a cash management account at a brokerage firm instead of using a high yield savings account. But the second account you want to have, whether it's a high yield savings account or whether it is a cash management account as a brokerage, is a place to keep another chunk of money. So typically you want to have 1 to 2 months of living expense in your checking account, but you might have 1 to 2 years of living expenses in this high yield savings or the cash management account. Now, there's a really unique strategy that I think way too many people overlook. And if you're in a high tax state, it's particularly important, but I'll talk about that in a minute when I talk more about the strategy. But the benefit of a cash management account or a high yield savings account is it just allows you to earn a much higher yield on your cash that you have sitting around. And one of the big mistakes I see people making is that they're holding way too much cash in a low yield account. You can earn 4 to 5% today very safely, but I see all the time that people have $100, $200, $300,000 sitting earning almost zero interest. And that's just money you're leaving on the table. Now, there are some downsides to these accounts. High yield savings accounts typically are in online banks. The online banks pay the highest yield, but they're just a little harder to use. You've got to move your money from that high yield savings account over to your regular bank account when you need the cash. And there's just a bit of a delay. And then if you use a cash management account to say hold government treasuries or to hold a money market fund, you have to sell those shares in order to access the cash, just causing a bit of delay. And then the other issue with high yield savings accounts and treasuries and money market funds is that the rate you are earning is going to be influenced by the Fed funds rate. So as the Fed funds rate begins to come down, as is happening right now, the yield that you're going to earn on that money is going to be reduced. Now, it's going to still be way more than you're earning in your local bank account, but it can come down. So you just want to be aware of that. Now, none of these are reasons not to use a high yield savings account or a cash management account, but you just want to understand that it's not quite as liquid as the money in your bank account. There might be a 24 to 48 hour lag to be able to access that cash, and also that the interest that you're earning can come down as interest rates come down in general. The next account, and this is honestly my favorite account and maybe one of the most underutilized accounts, but it is the health savings account, or often referred to as an HSA. And this is one of the accounts I think is way underutilized because it has triple tax advantage. Contributions are tax deductible. The account grows tax-free, and then the withdrawals, as long as it's for qualified medical expenses, they're also tax-free. So the money goes in, gives you a tax deduction, it grows tax-free, and then sometime in the future, you're able to take that money out completely tax-free. And then once you turn age 65, if you have more money than you're going to use for medical expenses, which rarely happens, but if that does happen, you can pull the money out just like you would out of an IRA, and you just have to pay tax on it, but you won't have to pay any penalty on those withdrawals. Now, there is one giant caveat that you need to be aware of with HSA accounts, and that's that it's fully taxable to your heirs. So it's essential that you have a strategy for how you're going to utilize this money during retirement, and you don't pass it on to your heirs, because then you lose all of your tax advantage. So in just a few minutes, I'm going to talk about strategies that I would utilize. And there is a strategy for the HSA that I think is brilliant that I hear almost no one ever talk about. I learned about it from Michael Kitces, who is the guru of financial planners. And he has a website. And when I read this particular strategy, I was like, this is brilliant. I don't know why everyone isn't doing it. So in just a minute, I'm going to go into that a little bit deeper. Now, the fourth account is your work retirement account. Think 401k or 403b. And these accounts for most people are the cornerstone of their retirement savings plan. Most people, when they come to me, that's where almost all their retirement savings sits. And part of the reason that so much of your retirement savings sits in these accounts is because it's really hard to get it out, and you're able to take it out of your paycheck. So it's almost a forced savings each month. And it's just a brilliant way to really amass a significant amount of retirement savings. And as you know, historically, the contributions to a 401k, they're pre-tax, meaning you don't pay tax on the money you deposit into that account, and the money grows tax-free. So when you put the money in, you're able to reduce your taxable income, and that can be a really great benefit. And the money can grow tax-free for the next 20 to 30 years. But one of the major mistakes I see people making is they over-rely on these accounts, and it can end up causing them a significant tax bill when they retire. So it's important to use multiple accounts when saving for retirement. And more people are now seeing that they have a traditional 401k and a Roth 401k. And so in a minute, when I talk about strategies, I'll help you kind of think through, should I be putting money into my traditional 401k, or should I put money into my Roth 401k? But we'll talk about that a little more in just a minute. The fifth account that most people have or should consider is a traditional IRA. Similar to a 401k, a traditional IRA lets you contribute money pre-tax, and your investments grow tax deferred. But an IRA allows you to have more investment flexibility compared to your work account. Work accounts typically have a fairly limited number of investments. An IRA, you get the same tax deductions, but you can invest in basically anything you want. Now, there are a couple of mistakes or misunderstandings around traditional IRAs. The first is people don't often realize that there's a contribution limit. You can only put in so much each year. If you're over the age of 50, you can put a bit more in. And then the second thing they misunderstand is that there's an income limit as well. If you have a plan at work, a retirement plan at work, there is an income limit. And if you earn over the income limit, you cannot get a tax deduction for your contribution. Now, you can keep putting money in, but you're not going to receive a tax deduction. That money is going to grow for the next 25 to 30 years. And when you go to take the money out, you're going to pay tax on that. Now, there is a way you can use this to your advantage, but we'll talk about that in the strategy section in just a bit, because all these different things are kind of tied together. The next account, and this is by far my favorite account. This is everyone's favorite account. If you're a Dave Ramsey fan, a huge fan of this account. And it's a Roth IRA. Now, here's how it works, right? The money goes in after tax. So you've already paid tax on the money, but you put the money in the account, and then it grows for the next 20, 30, 40 years, and everything comes out tax-free. There are no RMDs, and it goes to your heirs tax-free as well. So you can put money in this account, and potentially, depending on when you put it in, it could grow for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. You can have a massive amount of money in your Roth IRA, and it all comes out tax-free. And so if you qualify, I think utilizing a Roth IRA is one of the most powerful accounts you can use when planning for your retirement. And you want to start as young as you possibly can. Now, you have to have earned income to make a contribution, but if you can figure out a way to get your 16-year-old earned income, you should be maxing out that account for them so they can begin compounding this tax-free account as early as possible. Now, there are a couple misunderstandings or mistakes I see people make with the Roth IRA, similar to the traditional IRA. You can only put so much money in each year. The second misunderstanding, and this is a bigger issue, is that there are also income limits on the Roth IRA. And if you put money in and you earn over the income limit, you could end up causing yourself penalties. And so you want to make sure you do not earn over the income limit before you put money into the account. Now, there is a loophole. There is a way to get around this, and it is related to the loophole in the traditional IRA, which we will talk about in a minute when we talk about strategies. Thank you for sticking with me. I am almost to the end of my list. The last account, number 7, is the taxable brokerage account. I think it's one of the most underutilized accounts for retirement planning because unlike your retirement accounts, you can take money from a brokerage account at any time without penalty. It's super flexible. It's very tax efficient if used properly. And you could also take a loan out against it. If you need some cash, instead of doing a HELOC, you can take a securities-backed loan out against your account. And often it has a better rate than what you would have to pay for a HELOC. And so I would really encourage you to use the taxable brokerage account to your advantage. But there's a major mistake that I see people making over and over again is that they hold very tax inefficient assets inside of those accounts, and they're causing themselves way more taxable income than they need to pay. So that is one of the major mistakes or red flags that I see people make, but I'll talk a little bit about that in the strategy section. The thing you need to understand is that in retirement, there are strategies and ways that you can utilize all these accounts together to make them even more powerful. Now, the first account, the checking account, there's no great strategy here. Just don't keep too much cash in it. Keep 1 to 2 months of living expense in your checking account, but keep the bulk of your savings in a high yield savings account or in a cash management account. Now, the next account is the high yield savings account or the cash management account. Here's the strategy that I see a lot of people miss is that they have all this money in a high yield savings account, $200, $300, $400, $500,000. In our current rate environment, let's say you're earning 5% on that money. You're earning $25,000 a year, and all of that income is getting taxed as ordinary income. And if you live in a high tax state like California or like New York, you are paying federal tax on the income and you are paying state tax on the income. But here is a strategy that I see way too few people use. You can buy ultra short-term government treasuries. There's a couple of ETFs that make this very easy. They're very inexpensive. But if you own government treasuries, you do not have to pay tax to your state on that income. So let's say you live in the state of California and you earn $25,000 in interest on your high yield savings account. You're going to have to pay California $2,500. Forget what you have to pay to the federal government. But if you use short-term government treasuries or government treasuries at all, but ultra short don't have the interest rate risk. If you use the ultra short government treasuries, you don't have to pay tax to your local state, which is a great benefit for people who live in a high tax state. There's also a new ETF that's very tax efficient. The ticker symbol is BOXX. Bloomberg did a whole big article on it, but I think it could be a really interesting place to keep a lot of your cash. Now, this is not a recommendation. I am in no way recommending that you do this. I'm not your investment advisor or financial advisor. I'm just some random dude on the internet who likes talking about retirement planning. But Google BOXX and Bloomberg, there's a whole article kind of talking about this new ETF, and it could be a very efficient way to keep cash from a tax perspective. Again, do your own due diligence. This is not a recommendation that you use that particular ETF. But when I read the article, I thought that's a really interesting strategy. But at the base level, keep 1 to 2 years or even more in this high yield savings account, but be aware of the tax implications and try to find a way that you can mitigate the tax impact from the cash that's sitting around so that you can control your income a bit more. Next, HSA accounts. Now, the strategy around the HSA account, this might be the most controversial thing I'll talk about, but one of the things you can do with an HSA is that you can put the money in the account, allow it to grow for 30 years, and then you can pay yourself back for all of the medical expenses, all the money you've spent on medical expenses over the past 30 years. So what I tell people is, look, just reimburse yourself for your medical expenses out of pocket. Let the money in the HSA continue to grow. One of the mistakes I see people make is that they use the HSA kind of how it was probably intended to be used. You know, you put the money in and then you use it to pay for your doctor's bills. Put the max in, whatever that amount is, make sure it's invested, and then just let that money grow for the next 25 to 30 years. Don't use it to pay for medical expenses, because what I discovered is that you can pay yourself back later for all the medical expenses that you've expended since the beginning of the HSA plan. So let's say you started an HSA plan 25 years ago, you spent all this money on medical expenses, you paid it out of pocket over the past 20 years. 25 years later, after all that money has grown tax-free, you can write yourself a check and pay yourself back for all those medical expenses, but now you've let that money grow and compound. Now, the downside, the big negative is you got to keep track of your bills and receipts for 25 years. But if you're thinking about it or you're not sure it's worth it, go to a calculator, a compound interest calculator, and do 25 years of putting in the max amount. Let's say it's $8,000 a year. You put in $8,000 a year and you get 8% return or 9% return. Let's say you put it in the S&P 500 and you earn an annualized return of 8 to 9%. That amount grows to be a significant amount of money that can be super helpful for paying medical expenses in retirement. But also, if you kept all your receipts, you can write that check, take a large chunk of money out of that account completely tax-free, and be able to use it for living expenses or Roth conversion. So I think that's an interesting strategy that you might want to consider. Now, the next accounts are your work accounts, traditional 401k, Roth 401k. And I get asked all the time, should I put money in my traditional 401k or should I put money in my Roth 401k? And like every financial question, it depends. I would pay attention to your tax brackets and what your potential tax bracket could be in retirement. One of the things I've heard from a lot of retirees is that they said, look, we've been told that we're going to have a lower tax bracket in retirement, so go ahead and take the deduction by contributing to our traditional 401k and then convert it later at a lower tax bracket. But what a lot of retirees are finding out is that's simply not true. And so the line, I think, is really around the 22 to 24% tax bracket. If you aren't under those areas, it's a no-brainer. If you're under those levels, in my estimation, I'm not your advisor, I'm just a guy on the internet. But if you're under 22 to 24%, it's a no-brainer, in my opinion, to just use the Roth. If you're at the 22 to 24% tax bracket and you have a lot of future earning potential and there's a high likelihood you're going to put a ton of money away in one of these accounts, I think it's at least worth considering, should I go ahead and make the contribution to the Roth 401k over the traditional 401k? Once you get above the 22 to 24% tax brackets, 32, 35, 37, it starts to feel a bit more like you want to take the tax deduction today. Now, again, I'm not your advisor, but it's something you want to think about. Now, the other strategy that you can use, and many of you are already aware of this, but you can do a Roth conversion. So if you put a lot of money in your traditional 401k, you can someday in the future convert it to a Roth IRA. The trick is you need enough money in your bank account or your taxable account to pay for those conversions to make it the most impactful. And I have a whole video on Roth conversions that you can watch if you want to understand that strategy a bit better. But if you have a lot of money in your traditional 401k or you're thinking about taking the tax deduction today, you can convert that money to a Roth later. Now, for the next strategy, I want to combine two account types. I want to talk about traditional IRAs and Roth IRAs, because there's a way you can use these strategies together, particularly if you're a high earner. Now, as you remember, if you earn over a certain income limit, you cannot receive a tax deduction for your contributions to your traditional IRA. In the same way, if you earn over a certain limit, you cannot put in money into a Roth IRA. But there is a strategy where if you combine those two accounts together, you can actually continue to make Roth contributions. And here's how it works. If you earn over the income limit to receive a tax deduction for your contribution to your traditional IRA, what you can do is go ahead and make a non-deductible contribution to your traditional IRA, and then you can just convert that money over to a Roth IRA, even if you earn too much money to make a contribution to a Roth IRA. This is what's known as the backdoor Roth. Now, you have to let the IRS know you made that contribution or made that conversion. And that's basically it. There's no tax to be paid. There's no penalty. Now, some people think at some point the government is going to close this loophole, but as of today, they still haven't closed the loophole. Now, I'm not going to get into the details. I've already gone way long enough. If you want to look into that, there's a million people on YouTube who have great videos about backdoor Roths and mega backdoor Roths. So go watch those videos and they'll go into more detail. And the final strategy on that taxable brokerage account is pay attention to asset location. Place tax-efficient investments like bonds in a tax-deferred account with growth-oriented stocks and taxable accounts for long-term gains. You want to avoid really tax inefficient products like ordinary dividends or MLPs, or even mutual funds can be very tax inefficient and have a lot of tax drag when they're inside of your taxable portfolio. So you just want to think a lot about asset location, and this can really help reduce the tax drag on your portfolio over time, and that can really begin to add up. So I've gone on way long enough in this video. For those of you who made it to the end, thank you for staying with me. But I think these are 7 essential accounts that everyone should consider as part of their financial plan. And remember, each account has its own strategic use. And so be sure to use them strategically, but also how they interact together strategically. So thanks for watching. If you found this helpful, don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment below with any questions, and hit the bell so you never miss an update. And if you want to learn more about which account you should withdraw money from first in retirement, I've got a whole video where I go deeper into that and you can watch it.